Good evening. Welcome to the PoliticIt podcast. Tonight we have Melanie Monestere, and it's so great to have you.
Well, thank you, John. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, and you're a candidate for the state school board.
That's right. I'm running for State School Board District 6. My district is in Holiday, Mill Creek, Sugar House, U of Utah. I go right up to the Capitol, and the western boundary is 700 East. And I've got Immigration Canyon and Park City.
Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about your background because it's fascinating to me. You were trained as a lawyer, right?
I am a lawyer. I don't know how far back you'd like to go. I grew up in Minnesota in a small town. And my parents originally did not go to college. And then when I was growing up, my mother decided she wanted to become a certified public accountant. And when she was going through college, I was a very inquisitive child. And so I would ask her what she was learning about, and she would go over it with me. I was lucky that she was very patient. And so I ended up learning a lot about accounting and tax. And as a high school kid, I actually worked in her firm and worked on all sorts of business, bookkeeping, tax.
So from the time you started high school, you were doing it.
I was doing that, and I went on to go to college and law school in the Midwest, and I did actually take the CPA exam.
So where'd you go to school?
I went to Minnesota, U of Minnesota for undergrad, and then U of Illinois for law school.
So is that the Golden Gophers?
Minnesota is the Golden Gophers, and Illinois is the Illini, which is very similar to the Utes,
right?
Actually,
yeah.
And a Big Ten school. So we had a big football team there.
So did you like going to the football games?
I did. The football stadium was right by the law school, and it was a treat because we had, a great team. We actually had a great basketball team too while I was there.
Yeah, that's nice. So you got into the law. And what did you like about law school? What did you focus on? What do you?
I was really interested in, I always knew that I was planning to go into trust and estates and probate law, and a lot of emphasis in those areas on taxation and on, really helping families to, plan for their grandchildren and children and charitable giving, and I knew that that was going to be my focus, and so I have to say, that was always at the forefront, and I also really enjoyed constitutional law. I was very fortunate, actually. We had two professors at U of I Law School who wrote the book on constitutional law, and I got to study under those professors, and so that was a really great opportunity that I appreciated.
Yeah, and so you get married and have kids, and so what happened after that?
Well, I practiced law for 10 years, and I really enjoyed, helping families and, working with them closely to, set up planning and really give them a sense of comfort about what.
So where was this at, where you practiced law?
I started in Chicago at a big firm, and after 5 years, they moved me to Los Angeles to be in their practice there. We had a lot of families in that market, and we needed more attorneys in that area. So I ended up in California for a while, and we started visiting Utah regularly, and really fell in love with Utah at that point.
Oh, that's cool. And so you got married, right?
We did, and after my second daughter was born, we made the decision as a family that I was going to stay home with my kids. I really, enjoyed practicing law, but I was a little heartbroken when I would get home late at night and my children would be asleep because I was working, long hours with a lot of intensity, and so. My husband also had a big job, and so we decided that I was going to be a stay-at-home parent. And at that point, I was involved in the American Red Cross in Los Angeles. I was on the board and ended up being the gala chair, actually, and got involved, was very involved in our church, teaching Sunday school, teaching VBS for 8 years, and really got involved in my kids' school once they started school, and volunteering, being around the school, and really wanting to be a part of what they were experiencing, especially when they were very young, and to understand what was happening in their day. So I really wanted to be an active part of the school and to experience all of that.
So that was kind of your first brush with education and what was going on in the schools. And
That's right. And actually, people ask me all the time, like, what led to me running for state school board. And actually, Senator, you played a role in that, because you held a town hall, and this was not long, I think, after the beginning of the COVID crisis. And I attended your town hall, and I asked you a question. And my question had to do with, what's happening in our schools at that point, and who's making policy decisions in our schools. And through that meeting and talking with you, you directed me to the state school board. And at that point, I started getting involved and really following the board activity in the meetings, and started seeing that there were some disconnects between, I think, the policies that were being put in place and some of the decisions that were being made by our board, and perhaps what might be, the better interests of our children and of our teachers. And I think that getting more involved is really what led me to run.
now, didn't you have, as I remember, and I might not be remembering this right, but didn't you do something with one of your daughters where you actually challenged the school policy? And
we as a lot of parents experienced when our children were doing the remote learning, we had an incident one day where, as parents, we're there in the kitchen and we're listening to these videos, and the teachers are chatting with our kids, and the teacher actually told my daughter's class that they were to say the Pledge of Allegiance, but that before they said the Pledge of Allegiance, they were to kneel. And this was not what we expected to hear, and not what we expected the school to be encouraging or to be teaching them. And so I was visiting, making an appointment with our school principal pretty quickly, and just wanting to ask her very respectfully, how, what the school policies really were in these areas, and what was being communicated to teachers about, their mission to teach and educate versus maybe a teacher's personal political ideologies, and whether that would be something that they could use their teaching position to influence children with.
Interesting. And I think that's actually a concern of a lot of parents in Utah. I think the main thing is they don't, to me, from my conversations with people, they would prefer that the schools just talk about reading, writing, and arithmetic and stay away from divisive political discussions, right? And I just think, and whether it's discussions on the left or discussions on the right, why do people want to bring these things into the classroom at all?
Yeah, and I think that position of power that a teacher has over the kids is meant to be used, for reading, writing, and arithmetic, and for good purposes, and not for maybe personal agendas, and that doesn't really have a place in our school. My grandmother actually was a teacher, and she taught in a one-room schoolhouse. She taught all the neighboring farm children and her own 9 children. And, we can look at that today and kind of, laugh about, how much more sophisticated we may feel our schools are today and our education system. But I have to say that every child that came out of my grandmother's one-room schoolhouse knew how to read and knew how to do math. And currently in our Utah schools, we have less than half of our high school seniors graduating at grade level proficiency in math and reading.
That's really troubling, isn't it?
It is troubling. And, I'm not saying that we should return to a one-room schoolhouse.
Right.
But what I am saying is that I think we've added so much complexity and so many regulations and layers to our children's school day and to our teachers, the burden that is put on our teachers, that we can really improve, and we need to take a fresh look at what's happening in our children's school day, and look at, how is the time being used, and what can we do to make sure that those children graduating from high school, are at proficiency in math and reading.
Yeah. I was just thinking about this a few weeks ago. We went to Washington, D.C. My daughter was there as an intern, and we went to see the play Hamilton. And I've actually seen it a number of times. But one of the things that hit me there was, here you have this guy. He grows up, his mom dies, right? This is Alexander Hamilton, right? And he's on an island, right? They send him to the mainland. He's a young guy. And he's brilliant, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't have the same access to education that we have today, although he did end up at Princeton, but it just amazed me at the brilliance of these founders of our country, right? And their ability to communicate in writing, their ability to read profusely, right? And it just, it bothers me, just like you were saying with the one-room schoolhouse. It bothers me that we can't get all kids educated to that level, because we certainly have a lot more access.
We do. We have resources, and I think that we can do a better job. There are elementary schools in my district where less than 20% are reading at grade level.
I honestly believe that if teachers were focusing on the basics, the things they know really well, rather than get turned into counselors and going through all of this stuff that we go through in schools now. It seems to me it would just be better if we got that stuff out of the way.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. I think that our teachers, our professionals, they are experts, and we've given them too many burdens that don't relate to core subject teaching, and I think we've stretched them too thin, and we can maybe take some of those burdens off their plate, and also let them refocus, because our teachers are experts, and if we give them the freedom to teach the children in the way that's the most effective, I think we can get very different results. We've put so many regulations on our teachers and so many burdens, and that if we could really get them back to the joy of teaching, and the reason that they became a teacher is to help educate. And I think we can get much better results if we can free our teachers from some of these things.
So what would you do on the state school board? I mean, what kinds of things are you passionate about? Why did you get into this? And yeah. You've explained some of that already. But.
Sure. What I'd like to do is focus on, first of all, I think we have a huge problem with class sizes. Our class sizes are far too big, and that relates actually to another related issue is teacher retention. That we have got a big problem with teachers leaving the profession, and part of it is all these reasons that we've been talking about. That we need to make teaching a better job for our teachers again. We need to give teachers the respect and the autonomy that they deserve. And that if we need to look at compensation for our teachers, and we probably need to raise our compensation so that we can attract more teachers, reduce our class sizes, and make teaching more appealing again, so that our kids can have more of the individual attention that they need.
That's very good. Hey, we're going to take a break, and we'll be right back.
How are Utah schools doing? Compared nationally, we are ranked 50th in per student funding. That is last place. In performance, we rank much better thanks to the dedicated teachers and administrators who run our schools. I'm Melanie Monestere. We have wonderful schools in our state that are transforming lives every day. Yet, less than half of our high school graduates are at grade level proficiency in math, reading, and science. If half of our students are not learning, how are we preparing them for life? I hear from parents that many of our schools have eliminated vocational classes. and this weighs on our students who are not college bound. Class sizes have reached numbers that are all too high. This is an outcome of the teacher shortage. How can we address it? We need to make teaching an attractive profession again. Yes, that means higher pay for our teachers and eliminating many of the non-teaching burdens that have been piled on them day to day. It also means a renewed focus on respect for the professionalism of our teachers, respect for their commitment to teaching, their commitment to the children of our community. I'm Melanie Monestere, and if you are concerned like I am about our children's future, I would appreciate your vote.
Welcome back. We're talking to Melanie Monestere. And it's interesting, some of the stuff we were talking about during the break. And I'm here you were really legally, you were at the top of your game, right? And you make this decision one day that you need to stay home with your children. And what motivated that?
I think as a mother, from the moment that we find out that, that a child is coming, we're just so thankful. And really, it's just such an incredible time. And then when they're born and you realize that, every influence and everything that they're taught from the beginning all is cumulative, and that it's really mothers and fathers at home who are, we are teaching our children the values, we're teaching them the customs, we're teaching them how to be a part of our community. And it's really us, it's up to us to do that. And when I would leave for work in the morning after I had my daughter, I'd be a little heartbroken, and I'd sometimes get home late at night because I had a big job, and it, I was disappointed. I missed a few things. I missed a few firsts for her. And then when the second one was on the way, my husband, he said, look, you've had a great career. You've been doing this for 10 years. It's actually okay if you want to stay home with them. And he was really supportive. And he, I think if he hadn't suggested it, I would have just kept right on going. But my heart was really with them, and he had spotted that. So I did make the decision to stay home with them, and it really was such a wonderful time. I think from the time that they're born, it's such a treasure to be with them, and all the stages that they go through, and growing, and learning, and it just helps us to appreciate how much. Not only they need, but how much they need, the love that we share with them. It's really all about families. It's all about, all of the love and the joy and the connection is from our family. And that's why I think that, focusing on our families, focusing on, really helping parents to support their children's learning, that's really what we need to focus on.
Those lessons on virtue really happen at home, right?
They do.
I think that's why we have a lot of parents in Utah right now that are upset with some of the things going on in the schools, because some of the virtues that are being taught are really not virtuous, right? And they're things that we're worried about. And, I think it's great. I know, I would never go into details about your clients and stuff like that, but you really were at the top of your game. You were representing some of the biggest names in the country, really.
I was fortunate because I had, in law school, I took the CPA exam. And that was a success. I passed at that time. You took all 4 parts at once.
Were you accounting undergrad then, or?
I was not. But I had a lot of accounting credits.
I see.
Because of my, my childhood and learning so much about accounting. I had taken a lot of accounting supplementary to finance, investments, and also I got a double major. So I had a major in English literature. Incidentally, I don't know if anyone's really that interested in this, but and I had a minor in investment management. But I was really, because I was going into taxation law, I realized, hey, I could take the CPA exam. And, there's also the whole audit component to that. And I did go ahead and take the exam. And I appreciated the audit in particular because once my mother got her CPA and started practicing, she was doing tax and doing bookkeeping for businesses. And I was helping her with a little bit of that in high school. And she really developed a specialty in government auditing. And, our talk around the kitchen table was always about, what's happening in this, this audit and that audit, and looking for irregularities, looking for ways to be more cost effective, ways for our governments to save money. And she was actually auditing in particular city governments.
Oh, interesting.
And so we really that would be the talk at our
But
house.
wouldn't that be interesting? I was just thinking, what a great person to be on the school board. Maybe we could find more money for teachers just by looking at things that maybe aren't really needed.
I think that there's room for that, definitely. We've got a lot of big contracts with our state school board that we can relook at. We can take a fresh look at things and say, what are our real priorities? And maybe doing better by our teachers is a top priority, especially with the problems we're having with short staffing on teachers.
Yeah, that'd be wonderful. We had this. We had this bill last year that came forward about, books in the library that parents weren't happy with. And I've gone around the state, and it surprises me how people are fighting against removing stuff from the library that I firmly believe is taking away, or trying to anyway, of taking away the innocence of children. And I just, that's something we need to stand up against, I think.
Absolutely. In all 50 states, parental rights and the right of parents to be in charge of their child's education and upbringing, are superior to the rights of the government. And when we have parents, I think who in many cases want to really protect the innocence of their children, and they've struggled and endeavored to do that year after year. What we don't want is that child to innocently pick up an explicit book in a school library and be exposed to that book. And unfortunately, I think that in HB 374, and that's our right. bill, that calls for the explicit books to be removed from our schools, both from library settings and from classroom settings. A lot of teachers have their own classroom libraries. That the intent of the legislature was really a concern about the age appropriateness of a lot of these books, and that it's easy, I think, when people are not that involved in our schools today, they hear about a problem with books, and I think it's easy to go back to the book banning conversations.
Yeah, we're taking away.
The Catcher in the Rye.
The Catcher in the Rye.
The Catcher in the Rye was written in 1951, I believe, and that book was controversial in the 50s and 60s. And so when people don't really see what's going on in our schools today, they'll hear about this HB 374 and they'll think, oh, it's a book ban.
No more Kill a Mockingbird.
No more To Kill a Mockingbird. And
that's a book kids probably ought to be reading.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I think what's important that people really understand is the books that we are dealing with today are not our grandmother's books.
Right.
These are explicit books, and it's very troubling content. And I know that Senator, part of the reason that our legislature realized that we needed to get these books out of school libraries is because they actually read the books. They actually passed the books around and read them. And I think it's a very different conversation once you've actually seen this content.
Yeah.
And that's what is really important to reemphasize, I think, with people who are questioning why the legislature did this. I think it's really important, and I would ask them to actually read the books.
Yeah. Or, the other thing is I don't think people have even read the law that was passed, right? There's two parts to it. One is that it actually lays out what an explicit book is, right? And they put some very specific scenarios of what shouldn't be allowed at all. And then there's another step to it where they talk about the age appropriateness. So even if people make the argument that it's not really pornographic and you have to read the book in context, there's still a question of, well, what age is this appropriate? And maybe for a high school student, it, wouldn't matter. But the things that are very explicit, it's pretty specific as to what we don't want.
Yeah, I think the bill is well written. And, the other component that I think it's important in this conversation is, under Utah law, in our criminal code, it has, for many years and probably just, practically always been illegal to give pornography to a minor.
Yeah.
Giving pornography to a child under 18 is actually illegal, and that's a longstanding provision of our criminal code. And so when we find that a child can innocently pick up this material on a school library shelf or in a classroom, that really is concerning, because it's even, I think, contrary to longstanding principles that we've had in terms of children being protected and their innocence being protected.
How do we tone down the rhetoric, at school board meetings and other places? Why, there seems to be, and I've talked to, people on school boards across the state, I've talked to parents, I've talked to teachers, and there's this feeling that, the parents are going way too far, and, we're the professionals, so, leave us alone, let us do our jobs.
There seems to be a very big disconnect on some of our school boards between what the board views as a good idea and what parents view as a good idea. And I think that's one of the things we need to change. I think we can restore trust, with our parents and our teachers by listening to those constituencies. We ought to have boards that are respectful of parents, that are respectful of teacher input, and that are listening to the concerns of our families. I think that all too often we've had trouble with boards who believe that they are not accountable, and that really needs to change. Our boards are accountable. Our boards are responsible to the constituents, the taxpayers, the families, the teachers in their communities, and we need to restore that sense of trust. And I think that we can do that by having greater respect for our parents, both at the state board level and at the local board level.
Yeah. The other issue that bothers me a little bit too is that, there's, we need to protect minority students. We need to protect anyone in the schools. That needs to be safe for them, right? But to me, when I look at that whole thing, I say, the best way to pull kids out of poverty is to give them a really good education.
That's absolutely true. And I have to say, my father grew up on a farm. He served in the Vietnam War, actually. And, coming back, he was a carpenter for a while. And it was because my mother was able to go to college, first of all, and to become an accountant. And because I had educational opportunities, that has really been made a big difference in my life. And I think that we want to provide those for every student. We want to have an environment in our schools that's where every student is respected, where every student is really valued and encouraged. And that's how we are successful as a community.
I couldn't agree more. I think that's the key, because you think about it, you're really not many generations away from poverty, right?
That's right.
And you think about that opportunity that you were given, right? And every kid should be given the opportunity to learn.
That's right. I think that, the values of hard work and, commitment to purpose. And I think that, when I was really committed to my education. And I think that, we can instill those values. And if we can give kids the opportunities, kids can excel. And, that's regardless of background, regardless of where they're coming from. We can be forward thinking and really be supportive of our students.
Well, we're running out of time, but let's have some parting thoughts in terms of why someone in your district should vote for you for the school board.
I really want to help our community. I want to make our schools better. I think we can do so much better by our teachers. We can, improve their working conditions. We can improve their compensation. We can reduce our class sizes by getting more teachers on staff. We can look at what we're doing with our school day in terms of, how are we teaching, reducing our restrictions on teachers, reducing burdens on them, so that our kids are really getting a better experience and a better education.
Very good. Thank you, Melanie Monestere. And I just go vote for her, okay? And, get involved and help. I just hope you get a whole posse of people helping you get through this race. I really appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. I appreciate the time today.
Yeah, thank you. And we'll see you next week.